I am Claudia Karadimas interviewing the Chief Justice Earl Warren. Mr. Warren, what important change happened in the Supreme Court and what was its impact?
In 1953, Supreme Court Justice Fred Vinson died and I was his replacement. I've been called a key leader in the Brown v. Board case. Many argued that without me, the decision by the Supreme Court could have been very different, and that is understandable.
What did you and the Supreme Court decide in the landmark decision?
On May 17, 1944, the Supreme Court and I came to a conclusion. I read the unanimous decision that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate education facilities are inherently unequal. The news of this decision reached every corner of the United States. One newspaper said, "Neither the atom bomb nor the hydrogen bomb will ever be as meaningful to our democracy as the unanimous decision of the Supreme Court." Few Southerners welcomed our decision.
What was the court statement about the enforcement of the decision? What happened to the enforcement?
The Brown decision declared a system of legal segregation unconstitutional, but the court ordered that only the states end segregation with all deliberate speed. The vagueness of this statement and how it would be enforced led to opportunities for segregationists to protest and organize resistance. Some whites welcomed the Brown decision, but many considered it a personal assault on their way of life.
What was the impact of your decision?
Americans remain deeply divided over the issue of racial equality. African Americans were pressing to have our decision enforced and wanted their way of life changed immediately. They were faced with resistance in the form of white Southerners who were not open to change and considered themselves defenders of the Southern way of life. But because of these events, the African American struggle for freedom spread across the country, and what was originally a fight for education became a fight for the freedom and equality of an entire race.
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Good morning. Today we have Oliver Brown with us here today talking about his experience at school. Thank you, Oliver, for being here today. Could you please, in your own words, describe what your school is like?
Well, there were holes in the roof, so when it rained, water came in. In the winter, it would get really, really cold. Our books were really old and falling apart. Well, the white kids got new books every year.
What did you tell the school board about your situation?
Well, first I had to get some people who felt the same way about our schools. Then we went to the board. We told them that we felt that segregation hurt our education because we had all the bad books and desks and all that other bad stuff.
What would you say to people who don't think that that's a good enough reason to integrate?
I would say that until they have lived the way I have lived and gone to the schools I have, there's no way they can understand. There's no reason they have to talk about it because they don't know.
Thank you, Oliver. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Brown and Linda, for joining us today. I'd like to ask you a question. What compelled you to sue the school board today?
My daughter had to walk long distances and the school books were used and old, unlike the new books the white kids got to use.
Linda, how do you feel about this problem?
Well, I did not think it was fair to treat the white kids better than us. What makes them so much better?
Okay, well, how did you feel about the white kids having the bus and you have to walk long distances to school?
Well, most days she had to walk because I did not have any money to buy enough fuel to drive her, so it was very hard for her to walk so far.
Yeah, like my dad said, I had to walk very far even though there was a white school right around the corner.
Linda, how does your school compare to the white school?
Well, we get all the bad supplies when the white school gets all the new shiny things.
Mr. Brown, how do you feel about the NAACP helping your cause?
I feel very grateful for their support to make equal education for all the kids.
Well, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John W. Davis and James Lindsay Allman, for joining us in this interview today. Davis, you were the lead attorney for South Carolina, and James, you for Virginia. Would you mind explaining some of the arguments you used to defend segregated schooling?
Well, first of all, the Constitution did not require black and white children to attend the same schools. Secondly, we were making a good faith effort to equalize the two educational systems.
Those effects are not visible. Do you have an explanation for this?
Well, because black children were still recovering from the effects of slavery, integration was a fragile process, and it needed some time.
Interesting. Did you use any other whites to defend your position?
Well, we assumed that the social separation of blacks and whites should be regulated by the states because it's a regional custom. We pointed this out to the court.
Not only that, segregation wasn't harmful to any race.
However, some people thought otherwise. Can you provide some example of why segregation is not harmful?
Once again, states were doing what they could to equalize segregated schooling. When two schools provide the same education, there is no harm in going to one or going to the other.
If this is the case, where was the problem with having one school for all races?
It was integrated in our tradition to have blacks separated from whites. Also, many people believed in the intellectual inferiority of blacks, and we feared putting them in the same school might hinder white students' educations.
I see. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your responses to these commonly asked questions.
Hello, Ms. Brown. How do you feel that Brown versus Board of Education affected the Southern way of life?
I feel the Southern way of life was based upon, dependent upon separate education to fuel ignorance and bigotry. When separate education fell, so did the atrocious virtues and Southern way of life.
How do you think this affected the freedom struggle that African Americans faced?
Before this crucial case, the question was if we would ever gain equality. Now, with the fall of segregated education, civil rights has become a question of when and not if. It ignited the civil rights movement for decades afterwards.
Do you think that inequality has fallen today?
Inequality is still in existence, even with civil rights in action, and has led to movements for equality, racial and ethnic minorities, for women, for people with disabilities, and other groups in today's changing times.
Thank you.
Welcome.